There are a couple of games I want to try out on the Atari ST, but my 520ST has an SM124 monochrome display, and some of the games I want to try out also requires 1 meg of RAM. So I picked up this awesome looking Phillips CM8833-2 Artist series and ordered some PCBs from the sponsor of this video, PCB. In this video we are going to upgrade the Atari from 512K of RAM to 4 megs with custom PCBs. And restore what might be the coolest looking display from the 90s. Philips couldn't possibly have made it look more 90s than this, even if they tried. This display looks perfect. Unfortunately, the door is broken, as on so many other displays. But to be perfectly honest, it looks pretty cool even without that door. But if we have time for it, we'll see if we can fix it. I don't remember if this display came tested or not. So let's start by taking a peek inside. The name implies that there was a series of things with this look. But when I Google Philips Artist series, I can only find a few pictures of this display. And not that many pictures actually, so they probably weren't very successful. I wonder why. This thing looks perfect. At the back it has a rather unusual fold-out stand. How do we even use it? Well, I guess like this. Well, I guess if it works, it's okay. But it feels really cheap and flimsy. And the usual disclaimer, of course. Please don't mess around inside CRT displays. They may be charged with high voltages inside. Aside from a bunch of screws, it also seems to have some sort of clip here. So I'm gently gonna try to pry it off. Okay, that took some fiddling. I also have some cables here for the audio jack and the speaker. Very similar to the 1084. Apparently we've got a winner here. I can't see any soot. Awesome. I keep buying lottery tickets every time I find a display with a low mileage. But I haven't won anything so far. I guess if I win, I'll just buy more CRT displays. Wow, this thing has not been stored well. That is disgusting. This display definitely needs a bath. Well, I'll give it a wash and leave it to dry while we work on the ST. The display has 2 speakers in the lid, so I guess it's quite similar to the 1084S. And we've got a date here, June of 1991. Who would have guessed? The audio connector requires some kind of special tool that I don't have. But I've got something similar enough to work. To remove the neckboard, we need to cut a few zip ties. It doesn't seem to be glued in place, so we can just pull it off the neck and cut one more zip tie. It looks to be a very service-friendly display, because by removing 2 more screws, I think we can remove the entire PCB assembly. Very easy display to disassemble. A tiny little PCB inside here for the power LED. Well, a common issue on 1084s is the power switch. This looks identical, and it's broken of course, but not completely. This one gets stuck in a closed position, so we can probably use it while I wait for a replacement. Apparently it comes off together with the IEC connector, and this way we can access the switch enough to fill it up with some deoxit. And if we're lucky, it may start working again. I'm skipping ahead here quite a bit, because this display is very similar to many other displays I have disassembled on this channel. Now let's get that tube out. And I can start cleaning stuff. Okay, the display has been washed and left to dry. So this ST isn't really upgradable. But luckily, there's this project. We'll put some info on the display here somewhere, so where you can find this project if you want to build one of these too. I ordered some PCBs from my sponsor PCB and some components. And with these we should be able to add 4 megs of RAM to the original ST. Okay, let's start with R3 here. It's an absolutely tiny little resistor. And I finally got some 0.38 solder again. I've been using 0.5 solder for a while because I ran out of this stuff, but I finally got around to ordering some more. One wouldn't think it makes a big difference, but it does. This stuff is so much nicer to work with, especially on tiny components like this. R3 is a 33 ohm resistor, and there's only one of those. And then we've got two 68 ohm resistors, R1 and R2. A lot of projects like this are using these absolutely tiny resistors. I can't quite see why, but maybe this size is what people have in their stash. So maybe that's why people are using these. But I'm not going to complain. This is a really awesome project. So I'm really glad it exists, because this project makes this machine so much more useful. And next up we have 6 equally tiny caps, and they are all 100 nanofarad caps. These guys are, by the way, 0805. That means they are 1.25 millimeters wide. They probably don't look that small on camera, because you guys see this with quite decent magnification. Luckily there aren't that many, so I guess if you want to try out a project with tiny components, maybe this is a good project to start with. So I just add a tiny splash of solder on one of the pads, and then I reflow the solder and add the cap, and then I solder the other side. So it's not difficult, but it's quite time consuming. To hold the PCB still, just use some sticky tape and tape the board down to the bench. Next we need some RAM chips. These are specified on the GitHub page, and I got these for cheap from China. I don't remember if it was eBay or AliExpress. I'll use the same method here, but I'm gonna go with a larger tip, because I'm going to drag solder these guys. I'll add some solder and then reflow it with a chip on the pads. I'm gonna have to align this chip off camera. Okay, chip is aligned, and I soldered a few of the pads to hold it in position. So now I can add some flux, add some solder to the tip, and then we can just drag solder these RAM chips. That was actually a minor mistake. So it's kind of hard to reach now that these caps have been installed. So if you're building one of these up, drag solder the RAM chips first before you install those caps. Well, I think this is working, but it would have been easier to install the RAM chips first and then these caps, because I have to angle my tip to reach the pads that are behind these caps here. But I think it worked, so we're okay. I clean up most of the flux with a dry Q-tip before I use IPA. Otherwise it just creates a bigger mess with most of the flux removed. And then clean with IPA. If you like to keep things really tidy, you can blow the flux out from underneath the chip with some compressed air. Okay, let's do an inspection. Yeah, that looks good enough to me. So if I didn't make any mistakes, we now have 4 megs of RAM to install in the 520ST. Okay, I pulled the board out from the ST because I did a complete disassembly in the restoration video. I'll put a link down below to that video if you want to watch it too. So the ST has a very long row of RAM chips directly soldered to the motherboard. So this is going to be a pain to remove all of these chips. I guess the good thing is that I think I can reuse these chips for another project. But man, this is going to be a pain. And unfortunately, quite a few of these chip legs are bent. And it's going to make this desoldering an even bigger pain. I'll add some fresh solder to all the pins and skip ahead. Wow, just adding solder to that many chips takes a while. This may end up as a pretty short video, because I'm going to spend a lot of time desoldering and soldering stuff. That being said, the solder is coming out of those through holes very easily. And for that I am very grateful. Yeah, that solder is coming out very easily. That was a very nice surprise. Well, this pin here is connected to ground, so I'm gonna give it some extra heat. Wow, what a quick board to desolder chips on. Okay, let's try to gently pull on this chip. No, it's still stuck, so it wasn't quite that easy. By the way, these are 41256s, so they are quite useful in many projects. Well, I checked all the through holes and they are all clean from solder. Well, the pins are still stuck to the board, so I'll add some heat and see if that helps. Yep, here it comes. And here's our chip. So I'll use the same method and remove all the RAM chips. I'll skip ahead here. Wish me luck. Wow, that took a while. Well, not all of them were as easy as the first one. I had to reflow several of the pins and desolder a couple of times, especially the pin connected to ground. But compared to most motherboards, this was an easy board to desolder chips from. So, next I cut some pin headers to size. I think you can use regular pin headers for this project, but I went with these fancy ones because they are a bit smaller and more flexible, so I think it will be easier to align the board. To keep things aligned, I'm going to place all the pin headers on the board before I solder anything. Next up we need to connect some bodge wires to these pads here, because they are going to be tricky to access later when this board is installed. So this is a good opportunity to try out a helping hand attached to my new soldering station. Yeah, this thing is much better and much more solid than my old helping hands. I almost forgot. Apparently these Rev A boards are missing one trace. So we need to add one more wire hooked up to this pin here. There are instructions on the GitHub page. Not to the tricky bit. So we need to install the PCB. But the pin headers are pointing in all directions, so I'm gonna have to start from one end and then align every single pin header while I install the PCB and make sure every pin header is aligned. Now, I've been struggling here for a bit. This can't be the easy way to do this. This is taking forever. I'm not even halfway through. Let's try something else. Now that all the pin headers are nice and straight, I think we should be able to install a spare PCB on top. Well, it still wasn't easy, but much easier. I had to use 3 of the spare boards underneath to keep all the pins off the bench. There must be an easier way to install these. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Perhaps I could just install and solder them one by one, and then just bend them slightly to fit the motherboard. But at least now they should be perfectly straight. So now I can go ahead and solder all the pins before we install the PCB on the motherboard. Well, it's still not perfectly straight, but let's see if it will fit anyways. Yes, it does. But there must be an easier way to install these. I also soldered this bodge wire here to this pin. So that's fixed now. Okay, I soldered the 4 wires to the MMU. The corresponding pin for the 4 wires are available at GitHub. So the only thing left to do now is to solder the PCB to the motherboard. Okay, we're done. This board is now ready for a test. I dry cleaned the tube and washed everything else in warm soapy water. Now check this out. After the wash, that switch is now working perfectly. So I guess it was just filled up with dust. Okay, we're ready for a test. Let's turn the power on to the display first. Okay, that sounds good. We've got high voltage. Okay, fingers crossed. Let's see if this PCB works. Well, the LED lit up on the keyboard, but I've got nothing on the screen. Okay, well this is pretty messed up. Well, we've got something on the screen, but those are pretty messed up graphics. Oh, I see. I think it's that weird button here. It says green. I have no idea what it's for, but let's push it. Okay, it inverted the colors, but the graphics are still messed up. So this isn't looking too good, I'm afraid. Let's reset the machine. Oh crap. I think this might be a fail. Well, that kind of sucks. Well, I did a Google search and someone had this issue because of a bad connection in one of the sockets. So I'm gonna pull all the chips and clean all the sockets with deoxit. They sure are crusty. And this board actually has quite a lot of chips in sockets. Okay, deoxit magic, do your thing. Here goes. Oh no, now we have a black screen. What the heck? Oh crap. We just went from bad to worse. This socket here is installed backwards. The notch is on this side here. But on the silk screen, the notch is on this side. Oh, that sucks. I hope we didn't fry that chip. I think I have a spare, but that could take days to find in my stash. Well, I guess someone had a bad day at the Atari factory in 1984. Well, let's hope for the best. Okay, we've got graphics, that white screen, and the same garbled screen. Well, it's probably not a massive fault, because we do have graphics. We even have the mouse pointer, but the text up in the menu here is completely messed up. Well, this is a long shot, but let's try with the other display. Okay, we've got a desktop. No, the same messed up graphics. Okay, in that case, I'm going to push on the PCB and turn the machine on and off a few times. And see if we have a bad connection. No, that didn't help, unfortunately. Well, at this point I actually ran out of time for this week and uploaded this video to my patrons. And now is the next day, and I actually found a couple of more hours to try one last thing. One of my patrons left a comment that he had seen someone else having a similar issue. And apparently that person had mixed up the CAS1L and CAS1H. To be able to get this on camera, I'm going to solder a short wire to CAS1L. And we'll go with the red. And then I'll add a short wire to CAS1H. And I'll go with a blue wire. So the CAS1L is now visible on this side on the red wire. And it should be connected to pin 21. So this is pin 10, 11, 12, 20 and 21. So according to the description on GitHub, this pin here should be connected to CAS1L on the red wire here. And it is. And then on pin 22 we should have CAS1H, and it's connected to the blue wire. And it is. So according to the instructions on GitHub, these are correctly installed. Well, since I don't really have anything else to try right now, and I still have a few minutes to spend on this video, let's swap them anyways. If nothing else, it could be interesting to see what happens. So I'll remove this wire here and connect it to this pin here. And then I'll connect the other wire to this pin. So now they have been swapped. Okay, keyboard and display connected. Now let's see how it behaves with the two wires swapped. We got a white screen. Oh, come on! It works! The text in the menu isn't garbled anymore. What the heck? So apparently there is a small mistake on that GitHub page. The silk screen is incorrect. So the ST is now working. Well, if you're building one of these up, you may want to swap those two wires. I checked and double checked and made sure I had hooked them up according to the description. Okay, so there you have it. Let's try this machine with the mouse and the color display. Okay, the funky color display connected and the mouse. Let's turn the power on. We've got high voltage. Now let's turn the machine on. And it boots. And the image looks pretty good, but unfortunately it isn't synced up with my camera. Let's try some different settings. That's much better. Oh, it actually syncs perfectly with this display. That is not very common. Most of my displays just flicker on camera, whatever settings I use. And apparently I forgot to connect the diskette drive, but that has now been fixed. It's reading the disk, boots up, and now we have a floppy disk on the desktop. So let me see if I can adjust this image. Let's try the pots at the back. Yeah, that's much better. Yeah, that's pretty perfect. I'm still a noob to the ST, but this must be the low resolution mode, because these icons on the desktop are massive. Let's go to options and set preferences. Yeah, definitely low resolution. Can it do medium? Let's give this a try. It does, but they look really messed up. I need to do some reading about this system, but these graphics are clearly off. Well, I guess we could adjust the display to make this work. But to make it look good, we have to go widescreen. So that can't be right. I need to do some reading about this machine. Let's change back to low. Yeah, that's much better. Now let's open up that game and see if it will run. Let's try this file here. RICTOS. Actually, this doesn't look too good. I haven't played this game in ages, so I don't remember exactly what it should look like. But this is definitely off. Well, we're not done yet. Next we need to fix that door on the display and fix a minor issue in the SM124. And then I want to try this ST out with some games. Ideally with some Roland MT32 sound. I haven't checked if it's possible yet. When that video is done, I will put a link on the screen shortly. If you're watching this fresh, hit the bell icon below and set it to all. Meanwhile, check out the restoration video. I will end by saying thank you to my patrons. I appreciate your support. If you want to support me too, consider becoming a patron. Patrons get ad-free early access. If you like this video, let me know with a thumbs up in the comments. If you're a regular viewer, consider subscribing to this channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week.